NTV.
This is Morning at NTV, and many thanks for staying with us right here. Our next conversation, we are going to be taking a look at marijuana cultivation, processing and exportation in Uganda. Well, the conversation has been in the political realm since April of last year. Well, the Health Minister, General Cheng, did promise to license some 17 companies. 2 of them so far have been licensed to do just that. We have Hemp Uganda Limited and Together Pharma Limited doing the cultivation, processing and exportation of marijuana in Uganda. But then we would like to know more about this. Let me just give you a brief preamble. The Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 2015 allows cultivation, production and exportation of medical cannabis and mandates the Health Minister to issue written consent for medical marijuana. However, Dr. Ruth Cheng, the Health Minister, has since April last year kept the companies guessing due to the absence of guidelines for the new industry. We have 17 of those companies now. Only 2 have been licensed, and that is Hemp Uganda Limited and Together Pharma Limited. Remember, countries like Malawi and Zimbabwe have already positioned themselves to benefit from this growing industry. Now, to talk to us about the cannabis as an industry would mean for the Ugandan industry, we have Dr. Fred Muhumuza. He's a lecturer at Makerere University right there. He's a man of many hats, but you've seen him before right here on the show. A very good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
This marijuana cultivation, production and processing is estimated to create an additional 100,000 jobs annually. Why is Cabinet lagging on the release of the guidelines to be able to guide the licensed companies, the 2 of them at least, to start growing cultivation and exportation of marijuana?
I think it's part of a global value chain, so Cabinet has to be watching the outer space because you're not even sure about the 100,000 jobs. Sometimes these are estimates hyped up to make a case. But whatever kinds of jobs, because not all the marijuana will be consumed within Uganda. Now, the medical authority to process or the legal authorities to consume the marijuana is a global thing. And we haven't had all the countries globally allow that to happen. So you don't want to begin your growing here, and yet your destination markets are still debating their own laws. So you possibly have to synchronize so that by the time you make sure you're growing here, you are sure that the countries where you're going to export have actually allowed that medical marijuana to be going through. So we need to be not just looking here, we also need to be looking out there and synchronizing with the rest of the world. Otherwise, you end up being a pariah state with your marijuana out, ready to be sold, and then you are selling it illegally into these global markets, and then Uganda will be blacklisted for some other bigger reasons now.
Malawi did actually legalize marijuana 2020. You also have Lesotho in 2017. You have South Africa legalizing. What is the problem stopping Uganda from doing the same?
I think, as you said, the act was done, which is the law part of it, but now you have to put the regulations in place. Quite often, as we say, it is easier said than done. And that also speaks to the 100,000 jobs we are hoping. Because if you're already competing with all these countries you have listed, and I know many more will be coming on board, that puts a question mark on whether you'll get 100,000 jobs, because you may not be the best suited or the best producer to compete in these global markets. So you may find your industry doesn't pick up. But as said, the regulations are key. I think for such a thing that is quite dangerous, it's just like saying people you're now allowed to transact in guns before you put the necessary measures in place. We also need to protect Ugandans. So this is not just about growing for the export market. You also have to protect the Ugandans. And knowing Uganda's enforcement abilities in quite a number of things, maybe Cabinet needs to be very conscious, and possibly that's partly the reason, make sure the regulations are clear. If you're growing it for export, it shouldn't end up in Kisenyi, it shouldn't end up in Wandegea, it shouldn't end up in the ghetto somewhere in one other town in Uganda. So how do you manage that dicey and tricky part? I think is going to be a challenge for the country. And Cabinet maybe needs to cross over a number of T's and dot a number of I's in terms of who is going to be enforcing. Are we going to see another police unit taking care of that? Are we going to see the LDUs? Are people going to be trained and sensitized? You can end up with a bigger problem at home when you thought you were growing it for the export market.
And 2 companies have already been licensed. That is Industrial Hemp Uganda Limited and Together Pharma. Those 2 companies already have licenses to do business in Uganda. What does that mean for the rest, for the 15 other companies that were not licensed?
It's possibly also when you get your license, what else do you need to do? Do you have the land? As we've said, do you have the controls? Because a lot of this has got to be self-controlled within the companies themselves.
The idea is that you've licensed two companies before issuing the guidelines upon which these companies are going to follow. What guided that?
Now, the license might actually be saying you have a license, but don't start production. We will tell you when the guidelines are ready. So either way, you can have a license, but still you're not allowed to do the production. Like I've seen quite a number of universities, you get a license, but you're not yet chartered, but you can be producing and working. So they might be working under some tight controls, or they haven't been told they have conditions that they will have to fulfill before they can actually begin the actual production. And about the 15 companies, I'm not very sure, some of them may not have land, and we're seeing a lot of people land being grabbed, because this has got to be produced from controlled kind of conditions. You don't want to have small scale farmers, everyone growing and saying, I'm selling to that big company as an how to grow, and yet they have other options out there. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and to be good for, as you've mentioned rightfully, to keep the anxiety down. Whatever the ministry is doing, even when they haven't finished, the information should come out for the people to know. Because now if you have companies that have been licensed and they are guessing, and ones are not yet licensed, they are guessing. The public is also guessing. Information brings anxiety, and I know cannabis, one of the things it treats is anxiety.
Indeed.
So maybe people will begin, so you have created anxiety, let's grow to treat it. So they need to put out information on what are the timelines, even as they are still detailing up the regulations. Tell people what exactly on the outline is supposed to be done, and then people will calm down.
Amazing. Mr. Momuza, guess who was very, very happy when the news about the exportation of marijuana came into the political realm? It were the people in the black market. They're like, okay, this is good news. We are going to be able to actually cultivate, process, produce, and then export. But then government came up with another guideline or directive. You needed some kind of money in the bank, like some kind of reserve, billions of money before you even start cultivating marijuana. And that, according to some experts, sidelined the people in the black market, the very, very poor, who've been actually trading in marijuana for the longest time. So do you think that directive to put a loophole on how much money an investor needs to be having before you start cultivation did actually sideline the poor Ugandans who were thinking they were going to milk this cow?
Certainly for all these kinds of, should I say, risky or dangerous businesses, you've got to control who acts in there. As we've rightfully said, if you let everybody grow and you cannot regulate and manage 1,000 growers in one district, hundreds of thousands of growers across the country, then you've got to restrict on who grows. And one way of restricting them is to raise the bar. So that's one of the things, raise the bar, say whoever is coming into this business, because there's going to be a lot of investment, I've said, self-regulation. So if somebody has 2 acres, and then you cannot deploy people to guard your acres. By the time you wake up in the morning, thieves have actually harvested and taken out the marijuana, and we don't know where it has gone. But if you have this minimum big lump sum capital, you are going to deploy security people to guard your garden. So possibly that's why government is coming down to say, let's limit the number of actors, but also each actor should have ability to enforce the regulations we are going to put in place. Because I imagine you'll need security people to really guard those gardens. If I've had people stealing vanilla during the night, people are stealing coffee, people are stealing cows, you really don't want to discover 20 acres of cannabis were stolen in the night and they have disappeared where we do not know. This person should be able to protect the investment.
Indeed. And the black market has been actually
definitely going to be waiting.
Yes, they've been bagging a lot of money. If you look at Northern America, the black market by 2016 was worth actually $46 billion. And they estimate that after legalization by 2027, they would have bagged some $47 billion US, meaning the black market was already taking the bigger share. Now, after legalization, it's now the government that would want to have a share of that. And when you look at Uganda right here and the black market, how best can we roll out this new initiative to grow marijuana on a larger scale while not sidelining them?
I think that's actually one of the conscious things we really want to look at. That even when the laws and regulations are in place and people are being licensed, knowing the history of Uganda, the black market sometimes gets fused within the government.
Yes.
So what you're thinking is the black market might actually now have a right to get into government or to capture elements of government or to fail government's enforcement. That at the end of the day, some of the benefits that other countries are picking out, like foreign exchange revenues, tax revenues, may eventually end up not even being collected because somebody may get a tax exemption. Somebody may dodge, instead of paying tax 1 billion shillings to government, says, why don't I just pay this individual who is harassing me 100,000? So the enforcement is very, very nice. That the black market is not easy to deal with. This is actually a black market with a lot of black acts, and black here are not living, meaning Africans, real dirty things. Now we might see those dirty things being mainstreamed even into the main business as well. And of course the people who even are licensed might get exemption. I've seen people who export gold not being taxed, and yet gold is a very prime, precious commodity. So we might see some of these seeking exemptions of one form or another through black market or white market. And so we don't get the benefits that are on paper, that once we do this, we're going to get tax revenues, we'll get foreign exchange, we're going to get jobs, and eventually it becomes a market world, like taking people to Dubai to work. It's a good business, but it has some kind of dirty linings on the edges.
Do you think cabinet will finally approve and have marijuana actually freely cultivated, produced and exported, given the fact or the background of Uganda being a conservative nation? Remember yesterday during the enthronement of the new Archbishop of the Church of Uganda, Dr. Kazimba, he did say and stress it verifiably that Uganda shall not allow gay people in the country. That is a conservative nation. Now, another value of a conservative nation would be actually so against something like marijuana entering the social realm of the country because they believe it's unclean. What do you make of that? And do you think if cabinet approves, won't they be at loggerheads with their religious leaders?
Yes and no. The no part is because marijuana is a mixed kind of business. As we've said, there are medical benefits to it. Dealing with pain, some people say it kills some cancer cells. So it has some medicinal aspects, has some occupational aspects. And I think that's why it is under the Ministry of Health. So there's some genuine line on it where you actually say who should come in and who should not. And that's why I think government is trying to find that thin line of control. But it has that dangerous part of it that should the back door open and nobody is watching, it's going to be terrible. And the religious, the cultural, and any other civil thinking Uganda needs to keep government on check. And I think that's why government maybe is trying also to have strong, stringent controls on who gets involved. Because if it's a big company with billions of shillings, then that company should be held accountable. There should be means of how do we take it to court if it fails to fulfill its obligations, or even cancel its license. Those are the kinds of controls. But it's going to be quite a tricky path to walk. Because unlike gay, of course, it is clear the churches will say there's no social, cultural, medical benefit in this part. But here is a situation which comes with a silver lining. It has some benefits. The world is also debating, but as I've said, most importantly, we need to read the signal at the global level.
Okay, let's look at the pros and cons of marijuana usage. Let's talk about the advantages first.
Yep. There are medical benefits, as we've said. The bulk of them, and recreation, of course, it raises anxiety. They say it kinds of improves people's thinking in some ways. People who have pain, it will help to ease their pain. Not very many, but significant because they deal with extreme cases of medical practice where it becomes very important. Because the downside of it is, and of course there are other benefits in terms of revenues, in terms of jobs, as people are saying, which will be, people can pick out of it. But you are really putting your hand into the beehive.
Because
honey is in there, but also the bees are in there.
Even the National Health Service in the United Kingdom has been researching on marijuana use, and they did come up with a drug, Epidiolex, that can actually arrest the symptoms of epilepsy by at least 60%. And they've been successful after they roll out. They did roll out the drug in January, and. How best can Uganda do its research in this regard so that we make sure that we get the best out of marijuana? But before we get into that, you gave me the pros of marijuana usage. Let's talk about the negative effects first.
The negative effects certainly is abuse, drug abuse. And now you can easily throw it out there and it will be available on the market. Before you know it, America spends quite a lot of money trying to deal with drug traffickers out. And then rehabilitating people who have been affected. Leave alone the other effects of somebody who has been affected by drugs, picking on a panga, picking on a gun, picking on anything, and going out there to harm people, or even young people or the old people driving cars under the influence of these drugs and then causing accidents. So there are quite a number of many things. You may not quantify them at the point, but the global history is very clear on what has happened. And I think this is why we don't need to treat this as a Ugandan discussion. We need to tap into, as you say, the UK has been researching, the US has been researching, a lot of research is out there. As I said earlier, this information needs to come out so that every step of this decision and progress involves the people, either through just knowing, like we all know about coronavirus. So people need to have abundant information about it. What are its dangers? What are its benefits? What is the role of government? What is the role of these companies that are being licensed and to be regulated? So that everybody makes a contribution in making sure this lion we all want to enjoy keeps itself in the cage, or we keep it in the cage. Nobody should leave a back door open for us to have a problem. So the cooperation, the consent of everybody is going to be very, very key. And information for me is the most important thing we need to put out there. There's a lot of information, and the biggest snag would be if we do not share this information and keep it a secret.
Indeed.
Has somebody taken us through the Act of 2015 to see what are the provisions? Or are we waiting for it to fail and then we say, oh, take it back for amendment? There's certain things that may be glaringly clear that there are loopholes in there that need to be tightened even before you license the first company or let it go out there.
And also in the United States, if you look at the epidemics that they are dealing with, now they are not saying that cocaine is the worst chemical there is. They are not saying heroin is the worst chemical there is. They're not saying methamphetamine. They're talking about opioids. Opioids being the worst there is. They've killed thousands of Americans.
They have.
And you can't believe it, but opioids have also made touchdown in Nigeria. They are no longer talking about codeine. It's now opioids. Now back to the United States. What are they doing to help people who are addicted to opioids? Now, you will be surprised, but marijuana in the United States is being used as a getaway drug for people who are actually hooked onto cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids, and all that. Now, even the 65-year-olds, the veterans, the veterans in the United States and other seniors in the United States above 60 to 65 are also using medicinal marijuana to beat Alzheimer's and other underlying diseases. But coming back to Uganda, have we done enough research on marijuana before venturing into this really lucrative industry?
I think we haven't done sufficient research, and research is ongoing. As you've said also, the other side is mainly on the medicinal side. And that's at the use level. Now, in our case, our research and our investment in policies and regulations need to be at the upstream. Because for us, we are only going to be producing, maybe doing preliminary processing to sell into the global markets. And that's why you want to get worried that if people pick the plant right from the garden, what are they going to do with it? Crude processing of it. And maybe while the other people are processing to get out the drug, they are mitigating the intensity of some of these chemicals that are in there and sieving out some that were very dangerous. Now, if we're going to do it like the way we do our waragi in the village, you're just processing and boiling and taking. You don't even know what concentration you're taking, which chemicals are in there. So our research has got to be completely different because it's certainly going to spill over into communities and at the upstream level, not at the level of where you say it is now fully processed in the US and it's coming back as a drug with clear guidelines on how you take it and who should be taking it. We're going to have cases of people do self-prescription using the rough plant as it was in the garden. Now that for me can be a worry for us if we do not watch it very clearly, which can eventually mean the money we collected from revenues in terms of tax is now going to be spent in terms of undoing
rehabilitating
people, but also treating the accidents you are getting because some person rams into a bunch of people and knocks them dead, rams into a building. So we need to balance out and make sure we stick on the positive side of this very, very slippery, tricky business.
Well, of course, when it comes to marijuana use, you're not allowed to do any heavy machinery or do any work after marijuana use. It's supposed to be recreational. You're supposed to take a chill pill and just relax. You're not supposed to take it and then go and do work,
and do other work,
operate heavy machinery. You'll actually cause a lot of accidents. Now, when it comes to research, some experts contend that we actually have no research on medical marijuana or cannabis in Uganda, but when it comes to oil, at least we did educate a few people. When oil was discovered in Uganda, we set up a few courses. People who could go and study, get acquainted with that information. But as it is right about now, we have no experts in Uganda on cannabis. Isn't this a recipe for disaster, just in case the guidelines are passed and we do not have any experts?
It could be a yes and no. You may need some few experts, but in the Ugandan sense, sometimes even when you get the experts on the ground, they will not have the laboratories to use. You need to check out our research institutes to see whether this is something they can handle, or if they cannot handle, at least let's tap into the global research networks, which churn out the information, because I don't think even Uganda would get into the higher levels of processing. It's really going to be like coffee, where all we'll do is clean it up and then sell it at the rudimentary level. So we might just have basic processing of marijuana at the upstream level and then sell it in some form. So a lot of the detailed research is going to be done still in the developed world. But this now brings in the element of strong collaboration. We have managed diseases like Ebola even without strong research into the virus. So we need to say how do we have benefited from other research out there. How do we bring that information in? Have a few experts to explain some things, as you've said. Find some people to train, to really anchor the information home. They may not be the information generators, but at least let them anchor the information and explain some questions that the people may be asking on very complicated science that may come with this. Who should take it? Who should use it? When should they use it? Who should grow it? For me, that's going to be very, very major, because Uganda is going to really remain on the upstream end.
Who should grow it? That is the major $64,000
grow it,
question.
and who should trade it? Who should process it to move it from the farm to a processing facility? How much is being stolen there? How much is being stolen at the farm? How much sneaks out? Because the moment it finds its way into our market, we'll have a problem.
And just Friday last week, a Ugandan trader was arrested while trying to export processed marijuana to the Kenyan side of the border. So that got us thinking, will people still be arrested even when we expedite the processing of marijuana?
I think that's what we said now. It's a synchronization of laws. Because if Uganda says it's okay and Kenya hasn't, and you're processing in Uganda and find this way in Kenya, you're going to be arrested. So if Uganda processes, because even in America, it's very few states that have passed the law. So we might end up with it, and then you have nowhere to process it. And then whatever you do, Ugandans may still get arrested, because Uganda's laws don't cut across the world. So if you go to Rwanda, they will arrest you. If you go to Sudan, they will arrest you. If you go to China, they will arrest you. And yet here it is legal. So we need to harmonize and synchronize with our partners.
And you also, right there at Makerere University, would you advocate for the creation of a course, at least a degree course, to help our students learn at least a little bit about marijuana? Just to borrow a leaf from Colorado State University, that actually started a new course this very year, 2020, in marijuana. There's a degree. Do you think we should expedite the same, at least at Makerere University, a course in marijuana to educate our students who would want to venture into this lucrative business?
I wouldn't say degree as such, because it may end up being a bogus degree or too focused or something like that.
The degree would help in the research of marijuana, just to ascertain which marijuana is dangerous and which marijuana is helpful to you as an individual, which has higher THC and which has CBD in it that can help alleviate pain from an individual. That would be the reason why we would be having this degree, just as Colorado State University, because they say that's the main reason they decided to have a course on marijuana, to just teach their students and carry out a few research. What do you make of that?
I think they're tapping some money out of that. You may want to know that maybe when they have started a degree today, 2020, they have been working on it for the last 5 years or 10. So we can't start the degree immediately. Let's begin by possibly doing research and collaborating with them, because the main thing we need in the country is information. Research may still be at the far end of maybe another 5 or 10 year program, but information needs to be in here today. So let's start with the University of Colorado and others to get the information in, put a team in place, and Makerere can take lead, maybe a department, interdepartmental, whatever kind of mechanism that can be put in place, and the Ministry of Health itself should take interest.
Amazing.
To make sure the right people put the right information out there.
Fred Muhumuza, a lecturer at Makerere University, many thanks for having made the time to speak to us on this really contentious topic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right about now, I'd like to link to my reporter Stephen Mbide to give us the latest with regards to traffic right this morning. A very good morning, Mr. Mbide. What's the latest where you are?